Liberty Nation with Tim Donner.
So the deed is done, and after 3 tries and 32 years of seeking the highest office in the land, Joe Biden stands as the 46th president of the United States, repeating the age-old oath uttered by every president from George Washington to Donald Trump, and then attempting to stand on the shoulders of presidents in history past.
I, Joseph Robinette Biden Jr., do solemnly swear that I will faithfully execute the office of President of the United States, will, to the best of my ability, preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States. So help me God. The people, the will of the people, has been heard, and the will of the people has been heeded. We've learned again that democracy is precious, democracy is fragile, and at this hour, my friends, democracy has prevailed. So now, on this hallowed ground where just a few days ago, violence sought to shake the Capitol's very foundation, we come together as one nation, under God, indivisible, to carry out the peaceful transfer of power as we have for more than 2 centuries.
Now, many will say Joe Biden has an easy act to follow, that by being his old, boring, somnambulistic self, he'll make people appreciate that simply by not being Trump, he'll lower the temperature of a country clearly in need of a break from unceasing upheaval. But as he moves to reverse everything associated with Trump, 17 executive orders reversing Trump's actions on the first day alone, the new president will find that Trump, the president, apart from Trump, the man, may in fact be one of history's hardest acts to follow. But Biden tried to lighten his own burden and own expectations, signaling his virtue by repeating the same thinly veiled attacks on Trump's character that we've been hearing for the last 4 years.
Now, a rise of political extremism, white supremacy, domestic terrorism that we must confront and we will defeat. To overcome these challenges, to restore the soul and secure the future of America, requires so much more than words. It requires the most elusive of all things in a democracy: unity. I know speaking of unity can sound to some like a foolish fantasy these days. I know the forces that divide us are deep and they are real. But I also know they are not new. Our history has been a constant struggle between the American ideal that we're all created equal and the harsh, ugly reality that racism, nativism, fear, demonization have long torn us apart.
Sounds like a totally different nation than the one depicted by Donald Trump. And as Joe Biden passed the days of his moribund 2020 presidential campaign, a single phrase uttered in one of his rare public appearances, a presidential debate, came to define the man and his vision. It was a phrase which most of us will remember as clarifying and uttered as almost an antidote to President Trump's persistent optimism about overcoming the coronavirus plague: a dark winter. Now, you immediately suppose this to be another in a seemingly unending string of political blunders by the former vice president and current president. After all, what candidate in his right mind would deliberately project a gloomy dystopian vision of the future? Presidential hopefuls have historically and universally postured as optimistic, sunny even. But then virtually every metric that was 100% accurate in the fullness of time in the past was flipped on its head to produce a Biden victory. So the first ever win for darkness over light on the pandemic can just be added to the list. And President Biden certainly carried forward that doom and gloom in an inaugural speech, which was replete with cliches and those oft-repeated calls for unity and fear. That's why we're calling it the inauguration of fear. starting with a massive military lockdown of the people's capital and extending to what the new president describes as 5 separate, simultaneous existential crises.
This is a time of testing. We face an attack on our democracy and on truth, a raging virus, growing inequity, the sting of systemic racism, a climate in crisis, America's role in the world. Any one of these would be enough to challenge us in profound ways. But the fact is, we face them all at once, presenting this nation with one of the gravest responsibilities we've had. Now we're going to be tested. Are we going to step up?
Well, that's the question now, isn't it? And Biden said so much to do and so little time.
We'll press forward with speed and urgency, for we have much to do in this winter of peril and significant possibilities. Much to repair, much to restore, much to heal, much to build, and much to gain. My whole soul is in it. Today, on this January day, my whole soul is in this, bringing America together, uniting our people, uniting our nation. And I ask every American to join me in this cause. Politics doesn't have to be a raging fire, destroying everything in its path. Every disagreement doesn't have to be a cause for total war.
What then can or will the 46th president, together with his razor-thin majorities in the House and Senate, deliver to the American people? Topping the to-do list in the early days of this administration, beyond trying to reverse everything Trump did, are healthcare reform, climate change legislation, and measures to address racial justice. A public option added to Obamacare, transforming it into Biden care, will certainly require another tax hike. Re-regulating the energy producers who were deregulated by Trump will add familiar pre-Trump burdens back onto an industry that spearheaded energy independence, still the most underrated achievement of President Trump. And the sorry state of race relations would seem to require more than perfunctory virtue signaling bills in Congress condemning white supremacy and a declining Caucasian president thought illegitimate by tens of millions of voters seemingly on his last legs. And now we're witnessing a burgeoning crisis with waves of Central American refugees approaching our southern border, now defended by 452 miles of wall. Undoubtedly encouraged by Trump's defeat and Biden's plea for these refugees to wait and save him from a crisis on day one of his administration, it's difficult to envision anything in the months ahead approaching the utopian vision which the new chief executive will be pressured to embrace by AOC, Bernie, and the progressive wing of the party. Biden's early moves and cabinet nominations suggest a return to the very thing which has defined Biden's 5 decades in Washington, the entrenched establishment. However, time is short for a party in control of the presidency in both chambers of Congress. Democrats in 2008 and Republicans in 2016 were giddy after sweeping those big three. Both were in for rude awakenings 2 years later. So Biden, along with Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, and company, understands the need to make hay while the sun shines. The question is how he can do so without overturning his predecessor's many landmark achievements for which he was applauded by the majority of the American people and which, love him or hate him, marked Donald Trump as one of the most consequential presidents in American history.
Hi, I'm Lisa K. Donner, along with Mark Angelides, Sarah Cowgill, Tim Donner, and Scott Cosenza, and this is Liberty Nation.
Now let's take a look at the LibertyNation.com electoral leaderboard. It's still 238 for Joe Biden.
What if stories and legends can offer us the key to unravelling the hottest political issues of the day and apply their lessons to understanding the chaos of modern politics?
Impeach 45!
Only where freedom of speech is honored can people who look, sound, or think differently be truly free.
If you're discussing something that's difficult, the probability that you're not going to offend each other is zero.
President-elect of the United States of America, Donald Trump.
Donald J. Trump is now president.
With one click, Liberty Nation delivers tomorrow's news.
And remember, liberty.
Today.
All the time and everywhere.
LibertyNation.com